Hello and welcome to the 6th day of January 2022. My name is Kurt and this is my Good Life Meditation. I do this every day, first thing in the morning, to remind myself of what's important to me and to think about how I did yesterday applying these ideas and then thinking about how I'm going to tackle the coming day to make it a good day, to make it a good life. First, yesterday, another routine day. Nothing really ambushed me. Pretty straightforward with meetings. Not as productive as I would have liked. Just didn't seem to quite capture the traction. It was a good day. I worked solid and hard throughout the whole day, but I could have done better. And I will endeavor today to do better. How did I sleep last night? Was in bed by about 9:15, maybe 9:20, which is later than I like. I'm trying to apply that principle of fun and have a little more fun in life. So I was watching a movie last night. Hold on, might have to sneeze. Pardon me. Watching the movie was a good use of time, but it did cut into my sleep. I'm still under 8 hours a night, which is not good. I'm somewhere about 7.5 hours a night right now. I really need to up that day back to 8. My days are definitely better when I get a full 8 hours. I didn't climb the mountain either. Lately I've been climbing the mountain behind my house every day. It's not big. It's about a 2,000 foot mountain, desert mountain. And I feel good when I climb that every day. I get a lot of exercise every day. I'm getting a lot of miles. Average, I think, about 7 miles of walking a day, which is good. But climbing the mountain helps too. Oh, one thing was that I did yesterday that I can remember. I did something that a couple of years back would have unsettled me, and a decade back would have had me fraught. Yumiko wanted to go to Kohl's, like a department store type of thing, to return some shoes that she had bought me that didn't fit. She had bought them for me online, and they were too small, even though they were my size. So she wanted to return those, and then, horror of horror, take me shoe shopping, after work in the evening. Oh. It's bad enough to go out, and worse to go shopping. As soon as she said it, I knew it was a good idea, because she's doing me a favor insofar as helping me with my shoes. So of course I'm going to oblige that. And I told myself from the moment when I did it, I said, Kurt, this is a great opportunity to exercise temperance and fortitude. Temperance in controlling my what is it? What would it have been in the past? In the past, when if I would have accompanied her on an outing like that, I would have been visibly distressed at, one, being out, and two, shopping, especially shopping after work on a weeknight. I said, Kurt, you can do this. You can just take that feeling and you just kind of set it down, pump it, push it down, and you wear on your face an expression of cooperation, gratitude, participation. And I did it. I did it. We went out. We had a nice drive. We talked. We got to the place. We split up. She sent me off to find the new shoes. Well, she did the return, and I found the shoe. And I genuinely shopped, and I found the right shoe that fit right with a wide and everything, and it was great. We came back when she appraised my selection, approved my selection, and we were off. And then we stopped. We went to a restaurant to pick up dinner for the family because the time that she usually uses to make dinner, to prepare dinner, was consumed in shopping. That's also why I didn't climb the mountain. Then we came back and we had a nice dinner, and I watched a movie, a little bit of a movie, stayed up a little late, and then we were off. And I slept really well, really well. I woke up again about half hour before the alarm went off, but that's normal. Such a mundane, simple existence. But that's good at this point. Okay, let's do the good life. 7 objectives. 1, to be always ready to die. 2, to make good and effective use of my time. 3, to develop and maintain good and sound life principles. 4, to cultivate good emotional reactions. 5, to perform good actions. And 6, to recognize true limits and true opportunity. And then finally, 7, to do one thing at a time and to do that thing slowly, just like I'm doing right now. That habit and activity gets easier and easier with practice. The one thing slowly. Now my 30 principles. Principle number 1 is the principle of war. To always doubt and fight everything that I think is true. I want to be the foremost skeptic of my own beliefs, and to do the same for seemingly important beliefs that others may offer as well. Trivial things I don't fight. Important stuff I doubt, question, remain skeptical throughout life of. 2, reason and the sub-principles of honesty, objectivity, and doubt. To be a reasonable human being who is honest with others and himself, objective in my worldview, and always a skeptic for the important stuff. Next is the homunculus, the concept of a little human being that lives inside my head, who runs the show. That's the little consciousness that I'm using right now to make this video. Of course, that person doesn't exist, but it's a way of picturing the consciousness sitting on a chair behind my forehead, peeking out through my eyes, operating controls. The important thing is that the homunculus will die with me. My consciousness will wink out when my heart stops beating. Very soon after my heart stops beating. And if I'm dead, not resuscitated, or resurrected, wouldn't that be a surprise? Then that's it forever. It's a substitute for a soul, a reminder that we do not have a soul. The concept of a soul has all of its work ahead of it to be demonstrated to be truth. It's a wishful thought, but grown-up, reasonable people don't abide wishful thinking, or at least we try to avoid it, and we deal with reality. So, I'll be dead. So will you. And we'll never see each other again. And we'll never see another sunrise or think another thought or love another puppy or cry another tear. So we better do those things now while there's still time. And it's very, very little time. So make good use of that time. The next principle is the Anchorhold. It's the image of a rock sticking out of a dark, wide, deep sea. And each of us stranded on our own rock on that sea. And we can't swim to one another. All we can do is semaphore, wave at each other across the waves. And the water rises and falls with the tide. The waves crash and make the water slippery, the rock slippery. The wind comes and it gets cold, and night and stars and sun and heat and burning. And that's where we live our lives. Always worried about falling in. And certainly one day going in. Next is the home of good and evil. The suggestion that good and evil, right and wrong, are nothing more than opinions that we formulated in our heads, and best case scenario, we've agreed with between one another, making them somewhat objective, but still tied to our minds, that good and evil do not resound through the halls of the universe. They're just brain states within our noggins. Next is the principle of purpose. My three purpose are to become a husband, and then in turn a father. Not so, but in turn, but as part and parcel of it. I didn't become a husband to become a father, but it was a part of it. In fact, I didn't want to be a father at first. I'm glad I did. But that having children kind of fulfills kind of a mandate that seems to exist within us. That's the closest thing that I'll get, that I can so far get, to the idea of an absolute principle, an absolute purpose. But again, it's not the compulsion to have children is not something that I think is winding through the outer arms of the Andromeda Galaxy. I think it's just something that is in our biological brain states. So again, not absolute. The second purpose is to live a virtuous life, where virtue is a very specific thing. It's the improvement of the well-being, particularly of thinking creatures. And then the third purpose is to have some mission in life. Pardon me. My mission was the writing of this book, Going Alone, which is where I enumerate the Good Life Creed. It's one of the chapters here. So all of these objectives and principles are listed here, explained, and then this is the story of how I found them. That's been my mission, my purpose. And the book is done, so my purpose is complete. My child is grown. My purpose is complete. I'm attempting to live a virtuous life, which is an ongoing endeavor. That purpose is in process and largely complete. So I'm in a good place. I'm in a good position to die. I'm ready to die. I have met my condition for my first objective. Don't want to, but I'm ready to. I like to say my bags are packed. But I hope the train is late. But it won't be. It'll arrive when it will. Train to nowhere. Train to oblivion. Next is the atomic principle. The idea that everything in the universe is made of little pieces, as Democritus said. Atoms. You too, me too. And soon after we're dead, this will all just kind of dissolve away. And of quite ephemeral, not at all permanent, except the pieces themselves. Next is the principle of nature. Everything has a particular nature. And when we can identify that nature, we can live better apprehending the way things are and living life in accord with how things are. For example, it's the nature of me to get a little flustered at the idea of shopping after work on a Wednesday. I recognized that nature last night, and I dealt with it, and I had a good evening, in spite of the fact. I genuinely did. I didn't. It's not like I suppressed down the upset. I don't want to go shopping, and then it burst out somewhere else. It just gets suppressed down and say, okay, you stay there. I'm going to take care of doing my life well. And when I'm done, you have no more reason to be. You can just go away. And it seems to work. The old idea of pushing down our emotions will cause them to explode elsewhere. It doesn't seem to necessarily bear fruit. We can simply live a tempered life, a controlled life, and enjoy the satisfaction of having done so. I think that explosive upset comes from something else. You need to think about that. It may come from not living the life we want to live, not living a very satisfying life. Maybe that's it. Next is the pirate ride. The idea that free will is an illusion. That we can make all the decisions we want through life. And though we think we're making an active choice, in fact, there's no other choice that we could have made other than the one that we did. That's my operating position regarding free will. Now, I can't prove that, so it's a tentatively held position. But nor can anyone prove that they do have free will. So that's also got to be a tentatively held position. Next is maturity and the sub-principles of wisdom and fortitude. We become mature when we've lived some years, we've made some mistakes, and we've had some successes. We remember these, and we have the strength to avoid the mistakes and foster more success. That's a mature human being. It's pretty simple. Next is the social principle. You and I, we need other people, even if we tell ourselves we don't. Our biology is just built that way. We are social animals. We need one another to survive well. And as I like to say every day, our best ends are social ends. Next is the principle of public speaking. A reminder to be very careful and deliberate in our speaking, in our writing, our communications in general. To lay out our sentences in a particular well thought out structure. It gets easier over time, on the fly. It's to put margins of empty space between our thoughts. Again, as appropriate as the subject matter and the circumstance provide. To use words, even if we have a big vocabulary, to use words that are appropriate for the circumstance and the audience. To not be showy with our words, but to choose right words. And then finally to never, ever, ever gossip. And it's real easy to know when we're gossiping. If it's something that we would not want another person to hear us say, when we're talking about somebody else, that's gossip. If I'm telling my wife about my neighbor's new puppy, and I learned that the neighbor happened to be behind the screen right there and overheard that, it wouldn't bother me a bit. Oh, tell us about the puppy. That's not gossip. But if I'm telling my wife about my neighbor's infidelity, and they're behind that screen, imagine how it'd feel if having been caught. That's gossip. So I don't do that. And I don't do it for people that I know, and I don't do it for strangers. And what a relief that is. Sure, it means that I have to deal with more moments of silence. Sure, it means that I'm maybe a less engaging human being to others because I don't have juicy bits to share, and I don't participate when others attempt to share juicy bits with me. But I would rather be a man of integrity than an interesting man, if interest comes at that cost. The heaven knows there's plenty of things to be interesting over. Talking about others is not one of them. Oh, and it's so bad, in fact, that I rank it as one of my sins. I'll get to that in a minute. There's a principle where I list my sins. The next principle is called the Feast of Offal. Offal is the kind of the stuff that mostly you don't want when you're a butcher. Most people, you can't like sell a spleen, so well, or eyeballs or stuff like that. Usually, I think it's the intestinal stuff for the most part. Maybe you can sell a liver, but or a heart, but the rest maybe not. Stomach. So, in order to get us to eat it, to sell it, the butcher will have to mask it in some way, grind it up into sausage or something like that, and package it up with spices and sell that. We're like, what's in this? It's really good. I don't know. Well, that's offal. The Feast of Offal is when you and I get upset and we start hurling that stuff from within us, not our guts, of course, but our waste and byproduct of our thoughts, right? Our unconsidered thinking, our raw emotions, just spewing it out into the world upon other people, splattering them and the like. It's not a pretty sight. I'm sure you've all seen it. You've probably done it yourself. I've done it plenty of times. I try now to avoid doing that. Like I said last night, I didn't. My wife had. Well, she probably knows that I was struggling a little bit last night, but outwardly, visually, she would have no idea that I was struggling with that late evening or the early evening shopping because I was controlling the feast. On the flip side, I try not to indulge in the feast that others attempt to feed me. So if someone is having that type of moment, I simply observe it, assess it, and either try to help them or move on. I don't consume it, and I don't throw it back at others, because it has a way of cascading through individuals one after another. The next principle is called Temperance, which is our ability to control our consumption of everything, from food and drink to work, play, everything that we do, sleep even, just measured amounts. 3 sub-principles there are suffering, because we suffer when we deny ourselves what we want. I'd really love to have that second cookie, but I'll say no. Simplicity, because we live a simple life when we live a tempered life. And apathy, which is our ability to recognize what is outside of our control and to disconnect our upset or our sense of any emotions at all with that item. That's temperance. After temperance comes the horror show. Life is despite the fact that we tend to try to say it's a good day and to be an optimistic, I am very optimistic. Nevertheless, Life is a true and utter horror show. There are things happening at this very moment that are, dry my mouth to even imagine. And they're not just happening to humans, they're happening to our pets. They're happening to creatures in the animal world. In this sense, we live in hell right now. Horror everywhere around us. A lot of good stuff too. But we tend to focus on that. But I want to, at least I do, I want to remind myself that there's a lot of terror. Not so that I can be a voyeur, but so that I can keep that sobering reality in mind and deal with the world. Not waste my time on trivial stuff, but try to attend to more important things to relieve, to provide some relief to the horror. After the horror show comes that which must be born. Born is in carried, not birthed. What we have to bear are the things that are really hard, sometimes horror. Like I had to bear last night the fact that I did not want to be shopping in the evening, and I bore it well. I was listening to a podcast yesterday while I was walking about a man whose grown son committed suicide. And he was talking about how he bears that and the impact that it has on him. And that's, again, an example of that which we must bear. Sometimes with my work, I have to bear doing a really hard job, pushing through even though I'd rather not. That which must be born, because I have people that count on me. I have responsibilities. The sub-principle there is the idea of keeping our hand on the tiller of the ship, the sailboat, keeping that steady course. The next principle is distraction. And there's a second principle after that that's its partner. That is the Great Indifference. We distract our lives throughout our lives so that we don't have to see the awful emptiness of the universe, which I call the Great Indifference, which is quite scary. It's a universe that doesn't care. It's a universe where there are no gods. A universe where we're essentially on our own. We just have one another and our pets and the supporting infrastructure of our planet. So we distract ourselves with all that stuff. Again, work and play and hobbies and football games and pool, whatever you want to do. I do the same thing. I just recognize for what it is. And then every once in a while I go out to the desert and look the Great Indifference straight in the eye, or there is no eye, the emptiness, and say, holy crap. What a sobering experience that is for me. Next comes the best seat in the house. A reminder that I don't want to be anywhere else or be doing anything else or be anyone else, but to be okay with who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing right now. The next principle is the Path of Wildness, which is a way it's just a trick to break ourselves out of our certain circumstance, the safe and the sane, whatever status quo we're in. We assess the facts, give ourselves some time to think about them, and when we have enough information, we make a decision. And if we don't have enough information, we either give ourselves more time or run with our gut feeling, our first impression, and off we go. My suggestion is that the very act of departure, of moving on, is its own reward, even if it leads us off the edge of a cliff. But especially if it doesn't, and it leads us to a new and better life. The next is the risk of avoiding risk. Life has surface level risks that we can more easily attain that are quite could be more easily because we're encouraged by everybody, the whole society, our parents, everybody encourages us to get an education, find a job, locate a spouse, buy a house, raise a kid, save for retirement, etc. Nobody really bats an eye on that. Everyone, in fact, our whole society is set up to encourage that. That's the surface level risk. There's also a very deep level risk. That is the risk of becoming a self-actualized human being, to pursue ourselves and to ascertain and become the man or woman that we want to be, have the adventure that we want. That's the deep level risk. That it is a risk to avoid that risk, because we may wind up later in life having regretted that we didn't do anything more than the surface level stuff. We missed something deep. Some people don't seem to be bothered by that, so that message isn't for them. But for those of you that feel that calling at an early age, I recommend giving yourself what I call a great life adventure to pursue that, which is another principle coming up in just a sec. The next principle is called sin and damnation. There are 6 sins in my worldview. These are credulity, an overeagerness to believe; hope, which is desire uncoupled from action; faith, which is belief where the evidence for our belief is the belief itself, which is nonsense; dogma, where we believe because there's a large and impressive book that says something; authority, where we believe because someone who impresses us says something is true; and then lastly, gossip, for all the aforementioned reasons. When we engage in these sins, we live a damned life, not in some hereafter, but in the here and now. Next is complete oblivion, the reminder that after we're dead, there'll be no reunion with the ones we left behind, no reconciliation with anybody we left life on bad terms with, and no justice, because there is no lawgiver, no God. It's just a reminder that when we're dead, we're completely gone, so we can't have any of those things. Next is the great life adventure. One or more marquee events in our lives that define, preferably at a young age, help us to define who we are and what character we'll carry through life. You can have more than one great life adventure. I recommend them at a young age, in the decade of the 20s. Off to school, off to college, which is a great life adventure in its own right. And then after that, spend the whole decade of your 20s doing whatever it is, that thing that you might want to do. And then when your 30s come around, come back to us and begin pursuing those surface level risks. The season of philosophy is next. That's a time of life to record the consequence of our great life adventure. Maybe write your own book, or a poem, or a drawing, or whatever you want to do, to put down in words the consequence of your life and the choices that you made. Because soon you'll be gone, and that can remain for a little while at least. The interesting thing is that opportunity really only comes when the muse speaks to us. So we better write it down when it comes. And that you don't have to wait until you're old. You can start at any age, although it'll be interesting to see how it changes over time. If we've lived an engaged life, especially. Next is the bullseye aim, the reminder that we strive for the mark of the target, the center, but we usually miss. Sometimes we miss the target altogether, but once in a while we strike, and that's the exception. So I use that all the time, especially at work. Try and I try and I try and I usually miss, and I accept that as okay, because that's normal to normally miss. Good thing is I'm getting closer every time with practice, because I practice a lot. What did Michael Jordan say? The more I practice, the luckier I get. The next principle is the uphill climb, a reminder that life is a steady climb, step by step, up to the top, like my nightly climbs of Mount Fortitude. The higher you get, the harder it is, the more worn out we are, but the better the view, the more expansive the view. Then comes arena and utility. Life is an arena for our attempt to live well. And our principles, our objectives, our creed are the tools that we use to pursue that better living. Next comes, nothing is enough. I found that I do so much better with less. But only if I have worthwhile things to fill the moments with, other than consumption. And then finally, the principle of fun. A reminder to enjoy my life, not just take on the serious stuff, but to enjoy the moments. And I'm working hard at that one. It's a tough one for me. It's not a tough one, but a challenging one. Okay, that's it. That's my good life. Now, very quickly, let's imagine the coming day. It's a Thursday. The hump week is over. It really was a hump this week, getting over Wednesday. I am going to mostly work on the training course manual that I'm writing today. Something that I wanted to do yesterday, but I didn't get too far with. Today I'm going to make some progress. That's going to be the main focus of the day. And that's about it. I'm struggling right now just with a little bit of upset, because I just realized I could hear the heater came on. That means that the heater was left on last night. Big money on the bill for this big house. So it costs a lot to heat it up. It's, gosh darn it. But I'm exercising my fortitude to stay on top of that. Let that just boil itself, simmer itself away. It doesn't really matter. That's it. Okay. Have a good day. Be safe, but not too safe.